Good day. We're actually in many different time zones today, so I don't know whether to say good evening for Canada or good morning for Australia. But if you're watching our podcast for the first time, we're really happy to have you with us. And if you're a return visitor, thank you for coming back again and again. We really appreciate it. This is a podcast where we speak to women in business that are doing things that are excited about what they're doing. They're changing things, and it's a really great group of people that we talk with every week. Today, my guest is Chloe Familton, and she comes to us from Australia, and she has a pretty amazing story that she's going to tell us. So if you're ready, Chloe, let's dive right in. You're just embarking on your career. In fact, next week you go to college. It's -11 here, just saying. And she laughs. And you're going to college next year, I understand. And your chosen profession is aviation. Tell us why you chose aviation.
So I've always been a really, really adventurous person, and I actually got my start in flying through Girl Guides, or I think maybe Girl Scouts in Canada. So I've been a guide since I was about 10, and when I was 15, I had the opportunity to go to a Girls in Aviation Day. So they took a bunch of us down to the airport, and the younger ones had the chance to do a joy flight, and if you were one of the adult leaders or one of the older girls, you had the opportunity to take a 30-minute trial lesson in a small aeroplane. So I went to this day, 15 years old. I was probably the youngest person there who was learning to fly, and I had the chance to do 30 minutes of flight training, and I think at that point I absolutely fell in love with it. And I remember running home to my family and being like, this is what I want to do. And here I am, 3 years later, I have a private pilot's license. I'm about to start flying in the Air Force, and I'm incredibly excited.
Oh, good. Congratulations. Good for you. You recently took a trip in a
Yes,
plane
yes, I did.
by yourself. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So at the end of last year, actually, which is really weird to say, I'm still not processing it's January, but I took a Cessna 172, so that's a small four-seater light aircraft, and I flew it around Australia in the attempt to become the youngest woman to circumnavigate the country solo in a light aircraft. So the journey, all in all, took about a month. I stopped at, well, it would have been 30, 40 different airports all around the coast of Australia, first heading north and across the Northern Territory in the tropical parts, down to Western Australia, then tracking along the south coast.
Wow. So tell us more. Did anything in that trip, was there anything that at some point anybody said to you, you can't do this?
Yes, unfortunately, is I'm a very huge advocate for women in aviation and women in STEM, and I think the reason behind that comes from, I guess, some of my experiences on this trip is in Australia, women make up only 5% of licensed pilots. And I think very much there is still quite more outdated attitudes. It is still a bit of a boys' club, and I did have quite a fair few people express some concerns that I wouldn't be able to do the trip because I'm a young woman, and that initially was quite heartbreaking and a bit demotivating because a lot of that happened as I was preparing for or just setting out on the trip. But I think by achieving the circumnavigation, for me at least, that's done wonders for, I guess, my confidence as an aviator, and it proves that the industry is changing and you can achieve anything in it regardless of who you are.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I understood from the article I read about you that there were a couple of plane rental places that wouldn't rent to you because they didn't think you
Yeah.
could do it.
Yeah.
And now they're kicking themselves because you're
Yeah.
probably saying, "Oh, I got my plane from every time you have a chance. So tell us about the adventures you had on your trip.
Wow, where to start? I mean, I think I feel so honored and so lucky to have been able to do the trip because Australia is obviously a huge place, and what I enjoyed most is seeing the landscape around me change as I was flying. So from Sydney, as I headed north into a more tropical climate, it was so hot and so humid, and then even the ocean changes color in different parts of the country. It's this very pure, kind of very light aqua as opposed to your deeper blue that you have in Sydney, which is something I didn't realize until I set out. And I think very much flying in the outback is something I hadn't really experienced before the trip. For me, I learnt to fly on the east coast of Australia, so that's the most populated area. The airports where I learnt to fly out of are big enough that you could land a commercial jet on them, so you usually won't have trouble getting a small, tiny four-seater plane down. Um, that's very different when you head inland, where you'll be landing on tiny little strips that are not paved, they're dirt or grass. And in fact, in some of the really remote areas, I think you'd understand, of course, because Canada's quite similar, is getting fuel and accommodation. You don't have that everywhere. So one thing I found, it actually happened to me twice, is when I went to refuel the aeroplane, I'd be refueling at one pretty much the only place you could, which was a roadhouse along one of the only major highway stretching through that part of the country. So I'd land on some tiny grass and dirt thing. I'd taxi along what looked more like a road than a taxiway, and I'd pull up this tiny little building which had fuel for the cars and then also aeroplane fuel. So I actually remember Christmas morning, I was flying across the Nullarbor Plain, so this completely flat desert. I landed at about 9 a.m. to go refuel, and there were a few people out there having their, I guess, their Christmas morning breakfast. And a plane kind of goes past the same way you'd expect a car just to come fill up. But I mean, for me, it wasn't any, it was also quite strange for me because I'd never had that experience. But yeah, definitely a novelty, definitely a bit funny when you kind of look at it like that. But
But I mean, in these remote areas, you do what you have to do. And for some of these remote areas, aviation is the answer to to most of the things that need to be looked after. It's the same with Canada's far north. A lot of communities you can only fly into. So aviation is the answer.
yeah, I'd assume because you'd lose a lot of access because of the snow. We have a similar thing in the far north during the wet season where roads just become unusable. So that's something I found when I was flying through there is that I think for remote parts of the country, aviation is the lifeblood and the connection of it. And that's something I really came to appreciate and admire as I was flying through it.
What was the most memorable piece of your trip?
Ooh, that's a question. I mean, I have so many incredible experiences. I'd say for me, it would probably be flying into Catherine. So that's a small town, a small community in the far north of Australia. And it's also a joint military and civilian airport. So for me, having the opportunity to fly there and land while you had fighter jets using the same airport as me was some, because I'm a huge aviation nerd, that was an incredible experience just to sit by the fence and watch them all take off and listen to them all take off as well. That was really cool. But there were quite a few other things I'll need to make a special mention to. For me, I very much loved tracking along the coastline and seeing where the red dirt met the gorgeous blue of the ocean. And one other funny story, which I think really speaks about, I guess, the remoteness of some of the places that I was flying into, is there were a few times that I was prepping for a descent into a particular airport, and I'd be reading over the notes that because the government puts out notes about every single airport in the country. And there are a few places where it says it's recommended that you'll do a low pass over the airport to scare away any kangaroos or emus that might be on the field.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, me growing up in Sydney, I'd never had that issue, and I'm just there like, okay, there could be wildlife on the airport. Um, I did see a few things, not Luckily, not while I was flying, but there were a few frogs out and about. If I went walking, I'd have to double check my shoes because of snakes, and a lot of the hangars in the buildings had signs saying shut the door or else a snake will come in.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long exactly from the time you took off to begin your trip until the time you ended? How long was that? Were those flights? How long were you
So
gone from home?
the entire trip itself took just over a month. And on the day I'd be flying, I'd aim to fly about 5 hours a day, with a refueling stop halfway through. I didn't actually end up doing that. It was probably about three or four, just because the conditions were some days it meant I couldn't fly the whole way, or I had to pick a different route because of usually actually because of wind and also because of weather, because it's quite unstable in the northern parts of the country this time of year. So yeah, all in all, just over a month.
And that's one of the things I don't think a lot of the public understands is that with aviation, there are so many variables.
Mm.
The weather may be fine when you're taking off and it may be fine where you plan to land, but could be something crazy going on in between, so you
Yes.
don't take off.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure that people that I'm not really sure enough people have a full appreciation of everything that's involved in aviation and how easy it is for all of that to go sideways.
Yes, very much so. I think a lot of the safety behind it and the planning is something you don't actually get to appreciate unless you've trained in doing it yourself. And I think especially for a flight that took you over quite long distances to very different climates, it was about looking at firstly the forecast that you had leaving, anything along the way, what it was going to be like when you landed, because it might be fine at the moment, but in 3 hours when you get there, it might not be. And an issue I often had is sometimes in the morning you'd have fog or low clouds, so you had to wait a few hours for that to burn off. But the longer you waited, the closer you got to the forecast being not great at the end of the trip. So it was very much a juggling game of, can I get in here safely and beat whatever weather is coming in? How much of a margin will I have? Is that something that is firstly legal and something I'm comfortable with as well? Because whilst we have the legal minimums that you fly in, you'll also kind of set your own personal boundaries for what you're comfortable operating in. And for me, I did have a few times where the forecast was legal and doable, and I'd had people, because I was under the supervision of firstly my instructor and a few other more senior pilots, they'd look at the forecast and they're like, yeah, I think this is a go. And then I'd have to say, as the person flying this, I don't feel comfortable doing this, so I'll be staying.
Right. Yeah. It's like I said, there's so many variables that all
Yeah.
factor into the whole thing. Um, oh, qu'est-ce que tu aimes le plus dans le vol?
Euh, Pardon, pouvez-vous répéter ces
Qu'est-ce
questions?
que, qu'est-ce que tu, qu'est-ce que tu aimes le plus dans le vol?
Euh,
What do you love about flying?
pour moi, c'est euh, le sens de liberté, mais en même temps, c'est une sens de contrôle, d'être dans le ciel en avion. Jeez,
Beautiful.
I'm so sorry. I did French in high school. I graduated 2 months ago. I haven't used a word of it since.
Well, there you go. You recovered very well.
Had to my
Excuse me.
brain into a mode it hadn't been in for a few weeks, and it was just, oh, okay.
Well, and it does have to transfer. It's not
Yeah.
like you can just instantly. Anyway, I understand that your French is very good and
Merci.
tossing that out for you. Um, I really appreciate you being here. It's 5 o'clock here in Peterborough, Ontario. It's 12 noon where you are in Australia. I really appreciate you working with us to get, as I said to our producer, I want a time where neither of us are up in the middle of the night. And Dave has certainly done that for us, and we appreciate it. I like to end with some rapid fire questions just to get to know something about you that isn't part of aviation. So if you're a go for it,
Let's go.
then let's do it.
Let's go.
Okay. Question number one, Marmite or peanut butter?
Peanut butter.
Oh, Piper or Cessna?
Oh, I'm a Cessna girl all the way.
Sneakers or sandals?
I'm gonna say sneakers for that one.
Book or tablet?
Book, definitely.
Taylor or Adele?
Taylor.
We have a Swiftie with us, folks. Yeah. Well, she's certainly crushing it. I want to congratulate you on your trip. It was amazing. Thank you for making time to be on our podcast, Chez Les Fleur. I wish you every success as you head off on the next stage of your aviation career. And, you know, I'm fascinated by aviation as well. I have never gone as far as you have, but I've had a taste of it, and I understand how people are mesmerized and magnetized by it. It's pretty special.
Yeah.
So congratulations. Thank you
Thank
for
you very
being
much.
with us. I really, really appreciate it. And let's keep in touch. I want to hear how you progress and how things go, and go to school and just knock them dead, okay? If you're watching Chez Les Fleur podcast for the first time, we welcome you. If you're a return guest, thank you very much for coming back. We like to talk to women from here on in all over the world that are doing amazing things with their career. And thank you for being here. We'll see you next week. Bye.